response, were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought?
All right, welcome to the Author Brand Show. Today, I'm your host, Doug Crow, and boy, you're going to want to take notes today, or at least write down the stuff below in the show notes here. We've got a magnificent guest on today. He is an audiobook narrator, and if you haven't thought about creating a book on audio, you are missing out on a lot of revenue and a lot of exposure for your book. So let's get his perspective on the whole industry and what's going on with that. Let me introduce my guest today, Robert Plank. Robert, how are you?
Fantastic, Doug. Yourself?
I'm doing great, thank you. So audiobooks, man, I want to hear more about that and why it's important.
Well, for that, I would say look at the top Amazon bestsellers. Look at all the new books. You click through, there's an audiobook button. You look at wherever your book is selling or would be selling. Look at that category. Look at your competitors. Look at even other authors you know. You search them, and more often than not, there is an audiobook. So it's turned into, if you're the one author without the audiobook, now you're the weirdo. So just like how it's so important to have distribution and be on all these different channels. And I mean, imagine if your website was on Yahoo, but not Google, you'd miss out on all these channels. So in the same kind of line of thought, I mean, have your Kindle book, have your paperback, but also have your audiobook. That way people can actually find you.
Yep, absolutely true. I read up on this even as long as a year ago. I used to say short as a year ago. Nowadays, things happen quickly. As short as a year ago, man, I looked at the stats on Kindle sales and paperback sales. They were like flat to, single-digit growth rate. But audiobooks, 3 years in a row, double-digit growth rates. So I know it's powerful. I know it's important. We're encouraging all of our authors to get on that. Tell me a little bit about your story. How'd you get involved with being an audiobook narrator?
I had my own books. I've been doing internet marketing for 20 plus years. And just like how many people out there, I waited so many years to even have a book. And then I heard about audiobooks, and I waited so many other years to even have an audiobook of my own. And what happened with me was I taught membership sites, I taught webinars, I taught different ways of making money online. You know how we all evolve every few years.
Yep.
And then at some point, I co-taught a class about how to set up how to make money from all these different side hustles, right? From doing things such as audiobook narration. And then I did it. And out of all the different kind of things that I tried that fit my personality, it was a lot of fun. It was just a kind of a fun thing I did on my spare time. And then I got my wife on board with it as well. And then just a few years later, I think we're at like 600 plus audiobooks narrated, because it's a fun thing for us to do. And you always hear about this, Doug, how you should read books, you should listen to podcasts and audiobooks instead of rotting your brain with TV. So it's also our way of kind of being curious and learning about new things, but also getting paid to do it. So that is how the heck I fell into audiobook narrating.
I love it. That is great. That is 600 books. That's a library, man. That's really good.
Yeah.
When I look at the audiobook, universe, a lot of people think, oh, it's really just for, fiction stories where you have the theater of the mind. But nonfiction books, there's a lot of content there that I tend to, maybe I'm giving the point away here, but after I listen to a nonfiction audiobook, I oftentimes go back and buy the print book. Have you seen that as well?
And I've done that. And there's some sort of Amazon spookiness where you can buy both. And I think they give you like a little bit of a break if you buy both. And then you can read some of the book and then pick up the audio, like where you left off, and then listen to some of the audio and jump back to the print. And so, I mean, and some people learn that way, right? Sometimes you say, I'm driving, I'm in a car, or I don't want to just flip through all the pages. I want to give this book the attention it deserves. So sometimes, not always, but sometimes even I jump in on the audiobook just as like I know I won't have time to read, but I do know I'll be sitting for half an hour at the doctor, so I know I can listen.
Right. And I think the key point on the nonfiction world was, as I'm listening to the book, obviously it's a great book. It has good storytelling to it, but there were some really key points there that I couldn't write down while I was jogging, right? So I think that any author in the nonfiction space can see the incremental revenue and the multi-platform appeal of print, digital, and audio. I think that's probably my point here is you're going to actually not just make more money with the audiobook, but you make more print and digital sales too, in my opinion.
Yeah, it all connects.
Yeah.
And again, thinking back to anecdotally, me as a
Yeah.
buyer, sometimes I go and I find the book and I say, you know what, I'd rather buy the audiobook or vice versa. And
Right.
something to really think about is imagine going to audible.com right now and there's
Yeah.
like a search box just like there is on Amazon. Imagine searching your name. What if
Yeah.
there's no results for your name on all of Audible? There might not be. Or
Ah,
even imagine if you searched your keyword, right? Imagine if you
right.
searched real estate on Amazon versus on Audible, there's way less competition. It's way easier to get on the front page. So yeah,
Yep.
so many benefits of having the audiobook version.
And that's a key point, folks. If you didn't catch that, Robert has been in internet marketing for 20 years. So he just gave us really valuable SEO advice on another, not just forget the money for a second. It's going to help your digital footprint to have an Audible book. That's important. Man, good point. Obviously with 600 books, you've had some amazing things you've learned and people you've met or at least read about. What's the most interesting book you've done so far before you get to mine?
Off the top of my head, the
Yeah.
most interesting
Mhm.
was I read a guy's book that was kind of like a fiction nonfiction blend, right?
Uh-huh.
So there,
Yeah.
there's books like Who Moved My Cheese, and so this
Right.
guy, he's like a business turnaround type of consultant, and the book is about he went to some business in Florida that
Mhm.
manufactured hurricane shutters, and it was really successful, but it was like mismanaged, and
Wow.
they had
Yeah.
like bad turnover, slow
Yeah.
turnaround time, and it was just a lot of fun to read because it felt like fiction, but then he snuck in every chapter different kinds of like business accounting advice. But then it
Yep.
was fun for me because it felt a little embellished, and I mean it
Yeah.
probably was. And so he was this total hero of the story, and everyone was like praising him, and everyone like was gushing it throughout the story, and it felt like it was really kind of a ego exercise for him.
Right.
But it was still a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it, even though it got kind of hammy and corny because who cares about those things, and so that was a
Right.
lot of fun. It was kind of a fiction nonfiction blend.
I love those. I love those. I've got a couple of clients that write really good business fables, and I usually finish those books in one sitting because they're just very compelling. Where there's a really magical realism storyline or something, and you just get drawn into it. The ones that don't work as well, of course, are the ones that are really heady and academic, can put you to sleep. But sometimes there's valuable information there. What about like the most challenging book you've had? Was anybody like had like really poor writing or bad editing where it was hard to read or
Yeah, I mean we've narrated all kinds of books,
yeah.
so some are pretty bad. One
Yeah.
that was really a slog was it was called Affirmations for Black Men, and I
Okay.
don't know why they hired me, but it still worked. It was 20 hours, so 20 hours of affirmations, Bible verses,
Yeah.
speaking very slowly and deliberately, and
Yeah.
I got through it. But some are more exciting than others.
20 hours. Yeah. Well, it's broken up by chapters. I guess you could do a chapter a week or something. I don't know. That's a
Or
lot.
something, but I mean, some
Yeah.
chapters were at 90 minutes, so even that was
Oh
tough.
my God. Okay. Well, what is there an ideal size for audiobooks where people actually finish and consume them?
I mean, the target is just over 3 hours,
Okay.
so maybe like 30 or 35,000 words or so.
Right.
And I mean, what's great about the short books is that people listen to them quickly, but then
Mhm.
Audible gives you less of a payout, and so they always change their prices. But there's if you get to about 90 minutes, they give you X amount. If you get to like 3 hours, they kind of bump you up to maybe like from like $7 to $12. And then if
Right.
you're 5 hours, and there's different like sort of tiers, but
Uh-huh.
sort of the sweet spot is 3 hours because it's kind of a manageable size book for you to write.
Sure.
And then
Sure.
you get a decent payout, and then people
Yeah.
listen to it. So the sweet spot is just over 3 hours.
Nice. Okay. And in terms of the technical side, a lot of people don't understand the why it's important. And I've had a couple people say, "Yeah, I'll just record it on YouTube and that's my audiobook." I'm like, "Oh gosh, no, you need to have a professional, microphone and the foam thing." Talk to us a little bit about the technical requirements that are necessary to produce a good audiobook.
Okay, well, the technical requirements are to have, as you said, quiet-ish room without an echo. And so me personally, I have this fancy microphone right up there, and then on the other side of the web camera, I have this sort of the foam padding, so that way when I speak, the sound doesn't reflect right back at me, right? The idea is that your sound hits the wall and then it kind of goes off into the distance. So that's one aspect of it, is the microphone and then the environment that you record in. And then an Audible is owned by Amazon. And then to get something on Audible, there's a kind of an interface called ACX, sort of like how when you get on Amazon, you get on Kindle, and it's called KDP. So like there's a whole system. And they have a long list of certain requirements. There's a thing called like a RMS peak level, and they want it equalized, and a thing called a noise floor. And there's all this audio geeky stuff that they want. They have certain requirements, like they want like a second at the beginning of a pause when the chapter starts, and then a few seconds at the end. They want you to like record individual audio files for your individual chapters. There's a specific thing you have to say for like the opening credits and the closing credits, and there's a thing called a retail sample, so that way when someone goes to see your audiobook, they can click and play a little bit of a clip. So there's it's like death by 1,000 cuts, right? If you were to learn it yourself and figure out all these things, you could do it, but there's thing after thing to figure out. And it is possible, because this is the day and age where anyone could self-publish a book, anyone could self-podcast, anyone could self-audiobook. So it is possible, but there's like 120 different things.
Yeah. I don't want to do or learn all that. I think I will just be working with you, of course. And it comes to the voice training. I mean, obviously, some people have great voices for speaking and for narrating, and others don't. How do you determine that? I mean, do you have any training at all, or people just like your voice?
People just like my voice, and my voice is not for everyone. And just kind of thinking off the top of my head, I think in terms of, I probably have like 5 different voices, right? There's kind of a straightforward, an announcer, guy next door, maybe a hushed voice, and probably an over-the-top voice. Just like thinking on the spot, as far as like, well, looking at what I have, like here's what I'd kind of my different kind of style. And yeah, I don't do accents, I don't do characters, but there's a need to just read it through with someone who sounds good enough voice, interested enough, and gets the job done.
Right. And what's your opinion? Obviously, I might be slanted, but in terms of an author narrating it themselves or hiring you, is there a reason to go one way or the other?
I mean, I've heard this a lot, and for some books, it does make a lot of sense. Definitely not all books, but for example, I was speaking with a guy a couple of weeks ago, and he had like a very deeply personal story, and he wants his great grandkids to listen to his voice narrating his book, and like that's totally fine. And I definitely understand the reason for doing it, for like ego purposes and branding and consistency, and that's all great. The one flaw in self-narrating is that if you self-narrate, it probably will not get done, right? Because you have so many other things on your plate, and it is like anything new, it's a whole project you have to figure out. You have to, like we said, the software, the recording, finding the time, all the requirements. There's a lot to figure out. And so a lot of people say, I want to self-narrate, and that's great. And my unsolicited, gentle advice is, if you want to self-narrate, set a date on your calendar, right? Set a date, and whether it's March 1st, November 1st, in 2 weeks, 2 months, just set a date when you say, I want my self-narrated book done, and put it on the calendar where you can see it. And when that date rolls around and you haven't even started, then contact Doug and say, hey, Doug, I do want to narrate, but I realize I've got 1,000,001 things. But since I was talking to you, now it's 1,000,002 things. Let me just get this off my plate, narrate my book for me. So it's doable, but you probably won't have the time, just to be brutally honest.
Brutally honest, but it's also very, very helpful, as well as being truthful. So it's very good advice. When it comes to audiobooks, we've seen obviously the big growth there. I've also looked a little bit in the video component of that. Have you looked at that at all? People are actually doing a visual representation of their book. Have you seen that yet?
I've seen little things like that. what comes to mind is, I mean, you see like the little like book trailers, explainer
Yeah.
videos,
Right.
and there's a real estate guy, Chris Crone. He's super cheesy, but I like him,
Yeah.
and he's got all these YouTube videos where he's like in a booth, he's on camera, and he's like narrating his book, and he's all like, waving his arms, and that's cool, and that's a little bonus. But it comes back to distribution, and at
Right.
least with me personally, I say put it out in a format that makes sense, right? You put
Mhm.
your book out in book form, you put your
Right.
audiobook out in audiobook form, and then make little clips for YouTube.
Yeah.
But I say leave the audiobook on Audible. And
Absolutely.
YouTube little video clips, that's something separate, which you should
Right.
still do.
Right. Very good. Very good advice. With the 20 years of marketing experience in the internet, you already gave us some golden gems about the digital footprint and getting your name out there. Is there anything else people should be aware of? Maybe even off the audiobook topic here for a second, but things they can do to increase their SEO ability of their name and their book and whatnot.
So what has me, and like you said, it's a little bit off the reservation, but what has me excited is the last few days, I jumped into a tool called Descript. Have you heard of this, Doug?
No.
You can take any video or audio, but it's mostly for video. You can take any video and it transcribes it. And then you can click on any part of the transcript and it jumps to that part of the video. And you can click a button and it removes all the ums and ahs. And so the video kind of does like little quick cuts, but it's just completely
Wow.
done. And then you can copy and paste. So you can say, I recorded a 10-minute video, and without even watching the video, you can highlight sentences to cut
Mhm.
out and then have a really tight, YouTube or something like
Yeah.
that. And then you can also like copy and paste. So you can say, let me have this video and let me copy this paragraph and put it at the top as like a teaser clip, or pull it out as its own little like Instagram reel. And with
Yeah.
one click, it adds captions, and even those ones where like you see
Yeah.
on like TikTok where like every
Yep.
word
Mhm.
is highlighted.
Right.
So and that's the latest tool I've been geeking out with.
Nice.
But I think that to add a quickie little bonus one is,
Mhm.
my biggest weakness, and the weakness I see everyone out there, is not building a list. And
Yes.
and as you know, with these authors or even people putting out YouTube video
Mhm.
content,
Mhm.
not everyone knows what the goal is. And like, well, why am I putting my book and my video out? Because Doug told me to. Well, it's so that you get more attention, so that way you get found, but that way someone comes to your site, and that way someone joins your list. And a couple of years ago, someone told me that, your book is like the first step in your funnel, right? You have your book,
Yes.
so that way at the end, someone hires you for coaching, signs up for your newsletter, those sorts of things. And a lot of people forget that. They think, well, can
Mhm.
I just put out my book, sell 1 million copies, get $1 million? Well, you have to use it to build a list. And that's how we found each other, right? I
Yes, that's
was
right.
I was building a spreadsheet, and I was saying, well, some people come to me, but I also need to be
Mhm.
proactive and see who else, whatever speaking gigs I have,
Yep.
I can get lined up, or who else needs my book. So you go out and do the prospecting on social media, and you find specific people, and that's a form of a list. And I mean, if you have this, Doug, we were talking about this before. If
Yep.
you have a list, you can send one message and send one thing to all of your followers, and it's
Mhm.
a slow going process, but you have to start somewhere. So don't forget to use your book and your audiobook and your YouTube videos to build a dang list.
Absolutely right. So many marketers don't treat that seriously enough. And maybe I'll close on this one point, but they don't understand. All the social media stuff is fine, cool, but I can't tell you what I liked on my last post or what I commented on. It's gone from my brain. When I was there, fine, but now it's gone. There's only one thing that remains. It's the books on my shelf. They're there forever. We don't throw away a book. I ignore everything else. Social, even TV, even a TV interview on national TV, it's gone, right? Unless you record it. But who's going to keep going back and watching that? A book sticks around, as well as an audiobook. But the idea that you can actually, capture someone's brain, or capture a moment and then have it sit on their shelf, continue marketing, it's a pretty big deal, definitely some of the e-script thing. I'll definitely put that in the show notes below here for people. In terms of the last thing is you said your wife's also a narrator, so it's male and female narration here, right?
Male or female. And sometimes I've had a man buy, and then he'll want my wife to narrate, or vice
Mhm.
versa. So
Right.
sometimes people say like, oh, I want to hire someone who sounds like me. Sometimes they just say, I want this person to be the person
Mhm.
that brings the words to life. So a narrator does not have to be your clone or someone portraying you. So we do male or female, but sometimes the men have said, I want female narration.
Yeah, depends on what what your audience would resonate with. Really, you should know that, of course. Any parting words of wisdom?
Just do it. Time is limited. Get it done. And especially if, I mean, there's so many people when I contact them to get the audiobook narrated, they say, maybe I'll have an audiobook by 2026. I'm thinking, get it done now. Like, you don't know how much time you have left. By then you might have something else going on. Just get it done. Time is limited. This year will fly by before you know it. So strike while the iron's hot. And if this audiobook thing, if you've seen it, if it grinds your gears that someone else has an audiobook but you don't, then just let me and Doug take this off your plate. You have a book, and you can have an audiobook quicker than you think for cheaper than you think, and it is just done. It's one less thing you have to worry about. You can get to project number 998 instead.
That's right. You'll be narrating all my books right now. I got a file coming your way this week, so be on the lookout for that. And folks, if you're looking to get a book narrated, definitely go to the show notes, click below here, and contact us. Robert and I have a very special deal for people listening to this podcast. I can't reveal it right now because it might change very soon. But if you listen to it right now, click below, give us a holler, and we'll take a look at your book, give you a nice quote, and get it done in record time. How long does it normally take to get the book done once you get the file?
About 10 days.
Wow, that's fast. Okay, terrific. Great. All right, Robert, again, thanks so much for your time today. I appreciate it. Any parting words of wisdom besides get it done? Anything else? You got it?
No, leave it at that.
Leave it at that. I love it. Thank you so much. Have a great day. This is your host today for the show, Robert, wonderful guy. Make sure you contact us, click the show notes below, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.